What's up? Guess who's back? Kinda, I hope, I guess. Yeah, hey everyone, it's been a minute. Hope everyone's doing well. I am still alive. It's summertime. I'm in California in the Bay Area, and I am excited to be back, kind of. I don't know what that means. Big YouTube videos is harder than I thought it would, so props to all my favorite YouTubers and just anyone who's doing it, like, big props. You'd notice that my room is a little livelier than before. I have a cute poster and my little pride flag and like a plant, if I can hit that. Anyway, I've been trying to think of like, I really want to practice, what's the word? Like recording and like documenting, whether it's through writing or through video. And don't want it to be like this big deal that I'm making it out to be. So I was like, you know what? Let's do something like something super simple, super easy. I like reading, or I want to talk about books. Yeah, this year I did a reading challenge with my sister. I want to see who could read more books. And I figured that now that we're halfway through the year, like now is as good of a time as any to, reflect on what I've been reading and how I'm sort of processing the content I've been consuming. I'd say I really wanted to do this with my sister, but like we couldn't schedule it properly. So I'm just gonna do it myself, and I'll share sort of like, I think I'll still talk about some of my other favorites and sort of what I got out of them. Also, y'all are on my standing desk, and this is so cool. Look, shrinking. And we're gonna go all the way back up. Okay, now it's getting a little too tall. Okay, let's bring it back down. We having way too much fun. Okay, so this year with books, I usually read for school. Like that's primarily like the way I interact with literature. Or if like usually nonfiction or like textbooks and stuff for school. But with this year, I really try to be extra intentional with what I was reading. So I sort of alternated between nonfiction and fiction books. Usually I'd listen to fiction and then I'd like read nonfiction books, but then later on, I just started listening to nonfiction books because, like, at first I was like, well, like, if it's nonfiction, I usually want to like highlight stuff and like take away the information. Usually, it's like self-help type books, that's what I do on my Kindle. But I just started listening to them just because I was able to process it similarly, and I just like stopped to like take notes on like the quotes that I hear. And I try to be intentional about what I was listening to, so not just fiction nonfiction, but also like during Black History Month, reading books by Black authors, and then reading books by API authors, and sort of like grabbing the whole like range of experiences. And like with Black authors, like I thought during Black History Month, I thought it was a great way to connect with Black History Month and thinking about Black and African American history in this country. I started with James Baldwin's The Fire Next Time. And I listened to Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me, all the way to Wes Moore's The Other Wes Moore, and then Burt Bennett's The Vanishing Half. Like, all of these had me, like, stuck in, like, fully engrossed from, like, the first second all the way to the very end. And, like, I was constantly reflecting on different aspects of my own racial identity and, like, the structures in this world that continually tries to define us. And I think I'll talk about that when I get to my favorite book. I think one of those books is in my top 3. On books on, I have my monitor over here. I wonder if I can show y'all. Ooh, see my laptop? Not monitor. Okay. On books on AAPI, yeah, like AAPI authors or books centered on the AAPI experiences. And I think if you don't know, AAPI is Asian American and Pacific Islander. I think that's like the general term that we use to sort of talk about those of Asian and Pacific Island descent. And so from those books, from like that sort of category of authors or experiences, I listened to Home Remedies by Julia. Let me see if I can find it. By Juliana Wang. I think it's Juliana Wang. And then Interior Chinatown by I think James Yu or Charles Yu. Okay, oh my gosh, I should have done my research. Interior Chinatown by Charles Yu. And then Minor Feelings by Kathy Park Hong, I think. Minor Feelings by Kathy Park Hong. Yeah, and these were really awesome. I often find myself like a lot of the points that were brought up or like stories told, I find myself like relating to them, having being like an immigrant myself in this country, or understanding or like recalling something like I experienced myself because I witnessed it as an outsider, as a black man or as an African American surrounded by Asian Americans, or Asians, or yeah, like we experience things, like the experience, like I see it from my perspective, as an outsider, and no, it was really awesome to be able to like see this different perspective from within. I say the least familiar of those books was Home Remedies, by Julia Wang, because that one was most of that was like a collection of stories, and most of the stories were set in China, mainland China, and that was very different, just because like they would say, oh, this person grew up in this district or this part, and in my head I couldn't quantify or like picture like if someone was like, oh yeah, I grew up in like Louisiana, or like rural Alabama versus like New York City, like those are different experiences, and I think I can build more context. But I wasn't able to sort of form that same relationship, but it was still really awesome to be able to hear, like, I think there was one story about there were a pair of divers, from like a poor town. Anyway, I still enjoyed them. There was one book I didn't finish. I think it was, the one, I think it was called The Farm. I think it was called The Farm. I don't think I didn't finish that one. I found it kind of hard. It was centered on like the main character, she was from the Philippines, or she was of Philippine descent. And yeah, I think I just got busy. I never got to finish that one. Anyway, okay, so Black History, AAPI books, and I also read books on like sort of growing myself, thinking and bettering myself. So this included Grit, The Coddling of the American... So Grit by Angela Duckworth, Coddling of the American Mind by these two academics. Atomic Habits by... Oh my gosh, I really should have done my research. Atomic Habits by James Clear. And then Defining Decade by Meg Jay. And then Born to Run by Matthew something. Born to Run. Christopher McDougall, not even close. And some of these were challenging. Like, they were a lot more I figured these sort of nonfiction, self-help type books would be, standard preachy stuff. But some were a lot more challenging than I expected. Like, or at least like, they were challenging because I disagreed with a lot of the points. I'd find myself like, I'd listen, and then I'd be like, interesting. I'd reflect. And then I write some things down, or like you can check my Goodreads. I'm usually like posting updates as I'm reading. I'm like, this shook me, or like I'm kind of frustrated by this. For example, like in Grit, I thought it brings up a lot of great points. I've written papers or like essays about grit and what grit means to me and grit in the American world, or what grit means to be like the ideas of grit in American society. And she talks about that a lot and does like a lot of academic studies showing like what is grit and trying to find it. But then you notice that the author doesn't really talk about, or like at least recognize, the amount of privilege that affects our grit, or that can affect, or like the role that privilege plays in our lives. Like we can't say some people are grittier than others, just because based on, like, we can't look at everyone on the same playing field because everyone has different privileges. Like I think there are some statistics that said like, I'm totally gonna misquote this. It's like there are some people who stuck with activities throughout high school, for at least 2 years or at least 3 years. You built certain skills. So you stuck with playing the violin or playing a sport, even through like the good times and the bad times a little bit. And you come out of those experiences with more skills than if you just not participate in anything or you quit. But like sometimes like some people have to work, and so like let's say you wanted to play the violin or you wanted to play a sport, but you have to work to provide for your family. That might not work. I mean, then again, like you could be getting grit from doing work, from working, but then I don't know. I feel like there are a couple layers to it and things we have to recognize. And this example is from high school, could like be applied to work and life, and like understanding like privilege really plays a role in all areas of our lives. So I don't know, that was a little tough to reconcile. In Coddling of the American Mind, the authors, I felt like, didn't adequately account for the damage that extreme perspectives can have, especially outside academic circles. Like they're really pushing for these ideas of, well, like in academia, we should encourage diversity of thought, and we shouldn't. So if it means having someone uber right wing and ultra conservative coming in and saying whatever, like we should be able to like parse that out. But the thing is, like, there's so much more to that rhetoric than just us saying, oh, it's you listen objectively and then you decide and then you move from there. I mean, I wish we could all do that, but like those the words that come out from people, like they have meaning, they have power, and they can be posted on the internet, and it's not just going to be absorbed by academics. It's going to go out to everyone. And so I don't know, I feel like those matter. Some books were just bad. Like I didn't like, there's a book called The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F, and I was just like, this is trash. Anyway, I could talk all about every single book, but I just want to talk about my top 3 favorite books. So in third place is fiction. It was a book, or is a book, called Beartown by Frederick Bachman. If I've talked to you in the last 6 to 7, 8 months, I have definitely recommended Beartown. I kind of went crazy with Frederick Bachman this year. I read Beartown, A Man Called Uber, Anxious People, like the sequel to Beartown. Okay, literally all those books. But Beartown, I think, was my favorite. And I think the thing that got me the most, that reason I liked it the most, was this one quote. There's a quote, or this theme or motif. My English teachers would be disappointed in me that I can't remember what the name is. There's a quote, but that like it captured like the whole story. I think it's a motif. The quote was, culture is, let me see if I have it on my screen. Culture is just as much as we encourage. Culture is as much as what we encourage as, oh my lord, I'm butchering this. It's like, culture is just as much as what we encourage as what we permit. So basically, the culture that we have, that we live in, isn't just the things that we're encouraging. It's like we say, like we have a culture of like, this is a safe space, or our culture is one where we support one another, or like, it's not just like the things we encourage, but it's also the things that we permit. So think like, if something goes wrong, or if someone is blatantly, or if like, for example, marginalized populations in your workspace, in classrooms or in workspace, are constantly being spoken over, and we recognize that, but we're not saying anything, or we continue to let that happen. That is our culture. We can say this is a culture where all ideas are welcome. We can say that, but if our actions don't match our words, that is part of our culture. And in this book, Beartown, like we really see a town that really flips on its head, because of like, and this I don't want to spoil it for anyone. Something happens in the town, and we really see people, values you think that we want to uphold, that are now questioned, and often I think we see that in real life. We see that happening a lot in real life, especially when controversial things happen. People start justifying things, or people they never thought they'd justify, or they constantly say they justify until it happens. And I don't know, like it talks about mob mentality a little bit, and it was a fantastic read and listen, and I highly recommend it. In second place is Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson. And for what I'm about to say, like for this, like I just want to say that like I'll start here. So I expected this book originally to frustrate me about the criminal justice system. So Bryan Stevenson came to my undergrad he was like the commencement speaker for the class of 2018. I was class of 2020. And this is the first I heard of Bryan Stevenson and the Equal Justice Initiative. And everyone was like, oh, Bryan Stevenson, he's great. I was like, okay. Like, he's great. So, like, I listened to his speech. I was like, holy crap. Like, this man's, he's, like, freaking awesome. So, Just Mercy's been on my list. And my friend, like, recommended that I read it because they made a movie or TV show. Anyway, I expected this book to frustrate me continue to frustrate me about the criminal justice system here in the U.S. What I found instead was it frustrated me about the world that we live in. The world we live in here at least I live in, you might be watching this from outside the country, outside the US, but here in the US, I'm continually frustrated by the injustice present in our, not just the criminal justice system, but like the life that we live, we can talk about what it means, what prisons mean, what it means to punish someone. We can talk about what humane prisons look like, because often like prisons themselves aren't humane here in the US. Like people are treated terribly, you're treated like animal, you're basically slaves at some point, and it's like the new form of slavery. You can go and read Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow. And I think actually that book focuses more on the disproportionate percentage of people who've been incarcerated. That the whole idea of sort of mass incarceration and using different tools different tools and tactics, saying like drugs, like the whole war on drugs was really just like a ploy to incarcerate Black people. It's a new form of slavery, or the new Jim Crow. I guess we could go down that road, but this isn't the book. Here we talked about, like, in this book, there are examples like people like George Skinney, and people experience trauma while they're in prison too, and like the book talks about people before prison, their stories and how, whether they were framed for things that they didn't commit, or even if they did commit something, like how they're treated in the court system, and then like what happens afterwards. Oh man, it's been a minute. I need to go and reread my summary for this. Yeah, I'll stop there for now. But I do want to say that like Bryan Stevenson and his work with EJI, reading this book like came at a pivotal point in my life. I think I read this back in March or February, because I'm still figuring out exactly what I want to, like, how I want to operationalize the thing that I want to do. And I don't know where I wanted to start. And it's been really awesome to see Bryan Stevenson, someone who was, I think he was Harvard Law educated, and he went and he started working for a small firm, doing a lot of pro bono work in the South, and like had these experiences, connected with people suffering these injustices, and turning that into what we know now as the Equal Justice Initiative. Yeah, I'm gonna pause there. Yeah, I think my favorite book this year, number one, would be, or not would be, I think it has to be Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. It was just an absolutely like beautifully told story. It was intriguing from like the beginning all the way to the end, and like I loved everything, the plot, the prose, like how it was written, the characters. I really loved Kaya and her journey and the things she experienced. Again, I'm trying not to spoil. I'm trying to tilt this line. Maybe I should have written a script. A script could have been helpful. But the setting was awesome. I think that, what was it? Not Mallard. Mallard is Vanishing Half. The town that she lived in was like also interesting, because like the whole time you'd think like, I don't know, I kept wanting to think that Kaya was a black woman growing up in the 60s and 70s, but 50s, 60s, and 70s, but she wasn't. She's a white woman, but she still grew up in dirt poverty, and she educated herself in some ways. Well, not really herself, but mostly herself. She had some help. Throughout her journey, I wanted her to show the world how incredible she is. Despite all that she's been through, the kind of stuff that application scholarships or college applications, they love to eat those stories of grit, and again, that whole idea of grit. I want to say that we are our passions, and we are influenced by our settings, and sometimes it just takes one person to invest in us. And Kaya had one person invest in her, and I don't know. There's a lot here. I just really liked it. It was a really fun book, and the ending had me shook, but at the same time you could predict it. But just the way it unravels is just fantastic. I highly, highly recommend it, and I'm thankful for my friend who recommended it to me. So thank you, Lauren. And then honorable mentions. I really enjoyed The House on the Cerulean Sea. It was cute. I heard that TJ Klune might be problematic in some ways, but I enjoyed the book. I didn't think there was anything wrong with it. I thought it brought up great questions about representation, diversity, and again, actions versus words, and looking at that there are systems that are way bigger than us, and how we interact with it. Do we fight against the system? Do we accept the world we live in? Do we allow discrimination and prejudices to continue? What role can we play? Is it just a tiny step? And is that enough, or do we do more? And I don't know. I really enjoyed it, and the whole part of the magical creatures, and I don't know. I thought it was a good narrative. I don't know. I really enjoyed it. All Boys Are in Blue, by George White, I think his name is. Oh my gosh, I really should have done my research. All Boys Are in Blue. George M. Johnson. I don't know where White came from. That was a fantastic book. A book about. I think it was a memoir, and George talks about his childhood, his growing up, his experiences and it's really focused on the intersection between being Black and being part of the LGBTQ community, and sort of the duality and the struggles that come with both experiences. In some ways, it is challenging to be a Black person in this country for many different reasons. It's challenging to be a queer person or someone who is part of the LGBTQ community in this country for other reasons, but to be a person of color and be part of the LGBTQ communities alienates you from both communities sometimes. Sometimes being Black or being a person of color, there are traditionally these gendered stereotypes or roles that we're supposed to fulfill, and if you are part of the LGBTQ community, then you don't then you're alienated from the Black community, or you're that colored, oh my lord, don't cancel me, from the people of colored community, and yeah, I know there's struggles, and to face that overlap is just it's a lot, and we're making a lot of progress, but I think a lot of people really struggled, and we have a whole generation. We have a whole series of generations, that never really got to live their lives and be who they really are comfortably, and love who they want to love comfortably. And so I'm really thankful for George M. Johnson for writing that, and I really, really enjoyed it. I also enjoyed Good Talk by Mira Jacobs. That was fantastic. It was a good commentary on sort of talking to children, or young folks. Yeah, I mean younger, I don't know, teenagers, I guess. Not teenagers, younger than that. I don't know. It was Good Talk is good. I really enjoyed that. Midnight Library was also good. It was about different lives that we've, different possibilities in our lives, or different lives we could live. Every decision like there's a possibility or universe that exists with every other decision that we made. You know, I could, if there's a universe where I'm choosing not to make this video and my life could go down a completely different path, or it could be a very similar path. And it just made me, help me reflect and help me live my life intentionally. I know that if there's a life I want to be living, then I have to take steps towards living that life. Ready Player One was really good. 5 Days by Wes Moore was also good. You know, being from Baltimore, or like having gone to school in Baltimore. Honestly, I really enjoyed all 30 books that I read this year, and I can't. So this year, it's only the end of June, July. I hope I can read another 30 more. The original goal is to read a book a month, but it's been fantastic to be like able to just listen to books. I feel like I'm in my own world. Like I'll listen before bed. While doing dishes or taking the trash out or going on walks, and it's just like it's been fantastic to like be in my own world and consume all of this content, consume all these books, and also get to reflect through writing. And so yeah, I'm super excited for the next 30. Then I hope I can listen to another 30 books before this year ends, and maybe I'll do another one of these videos. I hope this has been entertaining in some way. I'll try and add some like animations and stuff. But yeah, if you have any book recommendations, let me know, or any like book clubs or stuff. Like I'm always looking to like not just read and like listen to books passively, but like to talk about them with people. You know, I think every time I'm reading a book, like the book I'm reading always comes up in whatever conversation I'm having then. And maybe if y'all have been reading for all your lives, like it's a totally normal thing, but for someone who just started consuming a lot more books, like I think I've read 30 books this year, and that's more than I read in the last 4 years. I remember there was one summer I read like 5 books in the summer. Like I read because I commuted a lot, and I was like, holy shit, like I read 5 books this year. But no, this is fantastic. So if you have any recs, let me know. Actually, I have a couple of the books I read here. Like there is An Absolutely Remarkable Thing. Actually, I didn't think I mentioned it, but this was a really good book. It was like the first book I read this year, and I loved it. I'm waiting to read the second one. The Color of Law. One of my best friends got me this book, and another like awesome book. It's kind of thick. It's kind of dense, like because it sort of talks like policy and like practices in history that show up in the that show how sort of segregated and how intentionally segregated the world we live in is. So that can be, sometimes it can feel a little dry, but it's very interesting because when you look at maps of the world, of cities today, and different like when you different cities here in the U.S., like it's so clear, you know, the effects of these decisions, whether it's like housing, zoning laws, or like transportation laws, or even like different statutes in I don't know, like it's just it becomes so clear. And like in Baltimore we have these phenomena called the black elm, the white butterfly, and that phenomena is not just in Baltimore. You know, we see stuff like that in Chicago and Atlanta, here in San Francisco, here on Stanford's campus, and like in Palo Alto. Like these divisions are so clear. I think I mentioned Ready Player One, and like I really enjoyed this. Honestly, it's probably one of my favorite books. It didn't make the top 3. Honestly, it very well could have been in the top 3. And I have a bunch more. Wes Moore's 5 Days is here, and then okay. Anyway, with that, I just want to stop here. Thanks for listening to me. Hopefully, I really want to practice and get back into making content for fun, and I'm trying to make it bite-sized and digestible for me to like to enjoy the process of creating these videos. So here's to hopefully more videos. Thank you all for listening, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace. Oh, that sounds like MKBHD. Okay, thank you all for listening, and I'll catch you all hopefully soon. See y'all later.